Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bold Take Scouting Podcast. As always, we've got all our handles from all our different platforms up here, and this is currently being broadcasted live on the East West Football Network. And so today we're going to be doing a Senior Bowl review, and we're joined here by our special guest, Nathan. Forgive me if I mispronounced my last name, Papandrea. And Nathan's been down to the Senior Bowl past few years, not this year because of COVID, but so he brings that insight on the Senior Bowl experience. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, guys. Thank you guys for having me on. I'm excited to be here. How are you guys?
Very good.
I'm good. Yeah, we're excited to have you on.
I'm excited to be here.
Getting right into it. Just tell us a little bit about your scouting background. We know you run a Seventh Round on Instagram, which is a very popular scouting page, put out a lot of good work, but just how did you get into the whole draft industry and getting down to the Senior Bowl?
Well, I came to a conclusion probably junior year that I wasn't going to play football in the NFL or college football for that matter, because some of us just didn't win those genetic lotteries. But so obviously wanting to stay in football because it's a passion of mine, I decided to try to figure out what avenues I could pursue in order to stay close to the sport. So I just realized I could write about prospects and I could meet new people and I could, hopefully just network with as many people as possible and hopefully get a job in the business somewhere. So I realized that the Senior Bowl was the best option for that, I would say. And here we are. And I've been running for Seventh Round. Now I'm at cover one and having the time of my life doing it. So
that sounds great. Yeah. I'll let you take it, Greg.
Yeah. So obviously, like we said, you've been down to the Senior Bowl a couple times. So what was a typical day at the Senior Bowl like for you? So maybe, during the days that they had practice, what was that like?
Well, I'll go by year two, because year one, you're a deer in headlights and you really don't know what to do with yourself. But year two, I would say I would fly in on a Monday night, because even though that was media day, that, being a student, you have to make some sacrifices in how long you can stay. And I had to sacrifice media day, but I get there Monday night, Tuesday morning, I would say. And practices was, I think last year at 10:30 and 12:30 or 12:30 and 3, something like that. So once you get to the field, you're there all day. You're there from the first practice through the second practice. So that's a 6.5-hour day for you right there. And then something I figured out last year was that the Renaissance Hotel, the home of the players, everyone's just sitting around. Everyone, John Gruden will come in, Matt Patricia will be standing next to you. And that's really your welcome to the Senior Bowl moment, honestly. But yeah, so you go at the hotel, you talk to whoever will listen to you, you enjoy the surroundings, and if you guys went, you'll find that the people you meet on draft media and draft Twitter and Instagram, they're probably there too, and they're looking for the same things that you are. So it's basically a giant job fair for you, the players, coaches, and anyone looking to make it in the football industry. So it's a 12-hour day.
Yeah, well, talking about everything that goes on, in your couple of years of the Senior Bowl, what would you say come to mind as a couple of the highlights, really the most significant moments in those couple of years?
Oh, well, for starters, my welcome to the Senior Bowl moment was year one, because we all love football and we've all watched our entire lives. You idolize guys like John Gruden and the Shanahan system and all that. So I remember the first practice of the first year that I went, I was right behind the car that John Gruden took to practice. And John Gruden opened the door right in front of me, and I was like, "What? That's John Gruden?" And I was shell shocked. And then, you slowly realize that just becomes a normality, and you have to get used to it, and then you just start getting comfortable with the surroundings, and it just becomes that basically every day for the whole week. So that one. And honestly, the hotel and just really watching all the players meet with agents and meet with scouts, because it all happens right in front of your eyes. So, seeing everything go down and the process behind it is probably the coolest part for me.
So I know you've mentioned to me a few times about a few of the notable NFL names that you've been able to have even a conversation with. Who would you say was your, I don't want to put you on the spot and say your favorite person, but who have you had the most notable conversation with at the Senior Bowl?
Well, I met Drew Lock a few times. That was probably a good experience. I met his father. That was a fun one. He was probably one I talked to the most, but I took an escalator with Justin Herbert. Matt Hurt, the New York Giants left tackle, was meeting with an agent, a couple steps in front of me. I saw Jalen Hurts a couple steps in front of me. So I'd say those are the big guys that really gave me that wow factor. But yeah, those were the fun ones.
I know you're an Oregon fan, so that must have been a big fanboy experience being in the elevator with Justin Herbert.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. It never
And I
gets
can't. Yeah, I can't even imagine. But wait, so my question for you is like, because so many of these guys, you watch them on tape, they're obviously like big, impressive guys, and you see the measurables, you see like a 6'5", like 250 or whatever. So like, who were like those couple players in those 2 years you were down there where you saw them on person, and you were like, wow, now that's a football player. Just wondering about like who really passed the eye test.
I think an easy answer would be Javon Kinlaw. I saw Javon Kinlaw last year, and he probably has one of the most impressive defensive tackle body types that I've ever seen. He is like all of 6'5". He's 320. He's muscled up everywhere. He's long, and just watching him move in space and move in person, I think was probably the most rewarding part of just evaluating him. That's a big one for me, for sure.
Yeah, and more of like the scouting perspective. Did going down there ever really like change your opinion on a player? Like sometimes you see them like up close and personal on the Senior Bowl practice field, and would you ever like maybe like tweak your opinion or think twice about a guy because of your experiences down there?
Well, I would say I was always on the Justin Herbert train. I always was, and like I'm proud of that evaluative victory to this day. But seeing him in person, I think really like pushed forward my appeal on him because, I mean, obviously the arm talent was there on film. Obviously he was a big quarterback. He has all the tools. But I think when you watch him move and when you watch him throw in person, and you just see that he's all of 6'6", he's all of 240, and you just see how like the ball comes off of his arm, that really propelled me to like push my eval forward on him and really, push him on to anyone that I talked to because you knew that he was going to be a franchise quarterback to me just by watching him throw the ball at practice.
Yeah, and I imagine like with the quarterbacks especially, you can really see outside of exactly how they play. You could probably also see like their command of the offense, how like guys who they've never been around like gravitate towards them and all that. So that must be a big advantage in that respect.
Well, yeah, and with that, I mean, everyone used to remember say like the Justin Herbert didn't know how to command the huddle. Justin Herbert was too introverted, right? But then, like, you're right. Like, the most invaluable part of the Senior Bowl is just watching how they stretch with teammates, how he celebrates with teammates after a one-on-one, or how Jalen Hurts, commands the huddle, and how when everyone comes out, everyone knows where they are and where they're supposed to be lined up. And so I feel like the most invaluable part of quarterbacks is not what you could see tangibly, but like intangibly, how they interact with their teammates and how they get people on the field set up for success. So that's definitely true.
Yeah, and I know Costa and I have had a similar conversation to that, especially when we were doing our quarterback podcast a few weeks ago. And we said that, you can see as much as you can see on film, but there's a point that, film doesn't show you their intangibles, doesn't show you how much of a leader they are and, how they can interact with their teammates. And that's such an integral part of obviously being on any football team, but especially the quarterback position. So I can just imagine how valuable, actually being able to be there, watching them perform, especially with players that they've never played with before. That must just really separate guys from, guys that, okay, they have the mental makeup to be a quarterback in the NFL versus, guys that, maybe they don't have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, it could be said with any position. And honestly, too, the best part about it is you have all the people there looking for the same information and the same, things that you are. So, I mean, if you're going there to really figure out how Justin Herbert commands a huddle, you'll have 10 people standing right next to you who are looking for the same thing and who have a different opinion on it. So, I mean, even from like your own growth and like your own standpoint as like a draft scout or as like someone who's really looking to make it in the media football industry, you're going there and you're learning and you're testing your knowledge and you're testing your limits at the same time too. So it's not just the players, it's a job fair and an evaluation for everyone involved.
So I just have a last question about your Senior Bowl experience. Was there any times, I know we talked about seeing guys in person that made you change your evaluation. Was there any time that you had a conversation with, maybe another scout or someone there, and they either swayed your opinion to like a player more or even dislike a player more?
Yeah, I can't remember names off the top of my head because I'm telling you, Senior Bowl, everything's a whirlwind and you talk to a lot of people in a day. But I remember people around me really made me think about Jalen Hurts in a different manner because obviously when you're evaluating quarterbacks, you look at like, all right, size, arm talent, the standard traits. But then you look at Jalen Hurts, a guy who, might not have the biggest arm on the planet, who, might not be the most prototypical. But then you get guys around you who really open your eyes to the fact that he can command a huddle, he can get the ball where it needs to be, and he can extend with his legs. And I think I undervalued that until I went to the Senior Bowl last year. And then when I just saw how he handled himself and when I saw, how other people viewed him, I went back and I really felt like my viewpoint changed a little bit, just because I feel like I was undervaluing the things that I should have been valuing to the same level of everything else.
Yeah, I think that's really a terrific example, and that's kind of like where other scouts like Alex and I, we haven't gotten to go to the Senior Bowl last few years. It's kind of like we're on the outside looking in. So I definitely hope we can get down to Mobile in the next few years and really take advantage of everything it has to offer, because that really does sound like a great experience just as a scout and in general. And to move on to this year's Senior Bowl, because we want to, the rest of this segment, review the week that's just happened, especially with the added importance, given that right now there's no plans for an NFL Combine. Who are we're just going to go around the three of us. You can start off, Nathan. Who do you think were like the 2 or 3 guys that really stood out and improved their draft stocks as winners of this Senior Bowl?
Well, I'm going to start with a D3 guy, and being a former lineman myself, I have a big appreciation for the big uglies, but Quinn Meinerz had a fantastic week. I mean, being a D3 guy, you never know how they're going to acclimate into these competitive, highly touted Division I environments. And he came in there and he had 2 pancakes on the first day, one on like a highly regarded defensive tackle in Levi Onwuzurike. So I think that opened a lot of people's eyes, including my own. He pushed around Oso Odighizuwa for a little bit, and the toughness he played with, his fashion sense, keeping the gut out. I mean, that opened some eyes for sure. And you hear that he broke his hand, and when he was fighting with Brian Flores to let him play in the game, he didn't end up playing, but the toughness to break your hand in an all-star practice and to want to continue it and compete in the game, I think that opened a lot of eyes. And so I think his trajectory could be similar to a guy like Ben Bartch, who played a good amount with the Jaguars this year. To a higher extent, we could even say Ali Marpet, who was a D3 offensive lineman, who's been a 2-time All-Pro for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's one. And then the other one is Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan. Last year at the Senior Bowl, I had the privilege of seeing Antonio Gibson play, and his explosiveness and gadget versatility and his ability just to be a Swiss Army knife anywhere you line him up on the field. I think that the NFL executive eyes to how valuable that is, and how valuable it is to have a person who can catch, who can run, and with 4.3 speed. And Dwayne Eskridge was clocked in at 4.33, I think, at junior pro day. So, going to be a highly touted, I think, day 2 player. And I think this week really helped him prove to be that. So those are my top 2.
All right, so I'll take my top 2 next. So my first one was Richie Grant, the safety from UCF, and I think I had probably about early 3rd round, late 2nd round grade on him before the Senior Bowl, but he had a great Senior Bowl all around. If you just went through draft Twitter all weekend, you could see everybody at the Senior Bowl was raving about this guy. He made plays day after day. I'm pretty sure he had the unofficial stat for practices of leading in interceptions. And I think, he just showed his knack for being around the ball and making plays. And, I think he really bumped up his draft stock. And I'm seeing people talk about him, as maybe a mid to early round 2 pick, just because of his performance at the Senior Bowl. And then my other one is Des Fitzpatrick, the wide receiver from Louisville. And I honestly haven't watched too much tape on him besides what I saw in the Senior Bowl, but I just know that a lot of people were raving about how he played in practice and how he ran routes, and then especially in the game, he really showed up and just showed his ability. And I know there was a play where he got wide open on what would have been a 40 or 50-yard touchdown, and I can't remember what quarterback was throwing him the ball, but they just completely missed him. So he just showed some of his deep set ability. So I think he's another one that really bumped up his draft stock and really helped himself with the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and so for my 2 guys, I think I would definitely be picking the same ones that Nathan did. I know Dwayne Eskridge was somebody that I actually had a 2nd round grade on heading into the Senior Bowl, and I think everyone else kind of got on that train right from day 1 as he was just beating guys like a drum. But to pick 2 new names, Cade Johnson, I think, was a guy who really impressed coming from South Dakota State. The Senior Bowl was definitely like a very big event for him, given that he really didn't go against top competition. But I thought he did a really good job of consistently getting open with his routes and and showing off good hands and run after the catch ability with that burst to separate. I think he's a well-rounded slot receiver, and he's somebody that I'm grading as a late second, early third round guy, because I think he's going to be a very solid slot receiver in the NFL, and then there's no turning that down in that draft range. And I think my other winner that I would like to talk about is Michael Carter, the running back from UNC. I had a third round grade on Michael Carter heading in, and I think he definitely maintained that. And because he just showed that he's such a dynamic, explosive runner. And while he might not be able to, he definitely won't be a workhorse because he's really got kind of he does have a slight frame for a running back. But we saw the 1-2 punch that he formed with Javonte Williams at UNC. And Williams is another guy that I love. But I think Carter's shown that he can actually be a 1B in a 1A, 1B system in the NFL, because he just gives you that special burst and athleticism to give you big plays from the position. So I think that he's another winner. I do think he needs to improve his pass protection, but at his size, he's never really going to be asked to stay there and block an incoming blitzer very often. So I think that those two would be my winners.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring up, I know we're talking about the Senior Bowl, but you brought up Javonte Williams and you had Carter as one of your winners, and it's just really impressive, the two running backs that UNC had this year, and they're both going to be day 2 picks. I would think. I know you said you have them both graded as day 2 picks. So do I. And it's just really impressive. Let alone, there's probably 5 running backs, 5 or 6 guys that go in the first 2 days, and then for the same school to have 2 of them in the same year, it's just really impressive. So I think we can move on now, and we can talk about some guys that either disappointed or dropped their draft stock over the Senior Bowl week.
Who's going first?
You can take it off.
Oh, okay. To start, I mean, I'm going to talk about a guy who I think could still be starter in the National Football League, and I think his performance got blown up a little bit out of proportion, but Deonte Brown, I would say, had a tough week. I mean, he came in at 6'3", 364 pounds, and he wowed all the measurables, but you really saw his limited mobility this week and his hip tightness and just how heavy-footed he is. And I mean, no one's asking Deonte Brown to be Pat Elflein or Garrett Bradbury or anything like that, and be athletic. But I think when you look at a guy with limited mobility and limited schematic projection, I think it does cause some red flags for some people. And I do think Deonte Brown can be a great starter. I think Damian Lewis from LSU last year was a really good example about how a heavier guy can flourish in a limited scheme. So as long as you don't ask him to pull it on slip screens or, go up to the second level too often, if you have a gap scheme, a power scheme, and you just ask him to block downhill, I think he can still be a good starter for you. But I think this week definitely opened up some red flags on him, even though he did have 3 years of really solid tape. So I think this is one of those examples that even though he had a disappointing week, you have to weigh it with what tape he put up against on the best of the best that he played in the SEC every week. So that's one. And then 2, a guy that I was high on last year on the draft cycle, but he kind of weighted down on me a little bit, was Alaric Jackson from Iowa. He's a toolsy kid. He's an athlete. He can, he's shown he can play the position well, but I felt like this week he just didn't look very comfortable in his pass sets, and he had a tough time in one-on-one. So I do think he could start, whether it's on the left or right side. That's remains to be seen. But I think he just didn't look comfortable. He didn't handle power very well. His feet were all over the place. So I know he can do it, and I still think he could start. But I think this week again definitely opened up some red flags on his skill set and the way he pass protects. Because in the end, a tackle's best trait is pass protection. So those are my 2.
Yeah, I have to say I like both Brown and Jackson, so I was kind of disappointed by their performances. But I do think that Deonte Brown, I don't think it's as much a knock on just his general ability, but just more that it might really be a knock on his scheme versatility, and that you really, if you want to get the best out of him, you have to put him in a power running scheme where you can really keep him in a phone booth, because he's going to dominate guys in a small area. He's got overwhelming power and size, and so I still think in the second round draft range he'd be a good pick for a team that's really willing to use him like that. And for Jackson, I think that just highlights what I think a lot of us already knew coming in, is that I don't think Jackson's a tackle at the next level. I think Jackson is a guy who slides into guard, because I don't think he's comfortable enough, as you said, with his pass sets on an island to really seal off the edge and stop an edge rusher. So I think if he kicks into guard, then he can have a successful career. And so to give you my 2 guys on guys who really decreased their draft stock. My first one would be Marvin Wilson. I think that he had a down year in 2020. This is a guy we were thinking might be a first-round pick, but he disappeared in some stretches, and he didn't show much at the Senior Bowl to reverse that. And so his draft stock has just been in free fall for a while, and he didn't take the opportunity. He had to save it. And really, I think the biggest loser for me is Jamie Newman. Jamie Newman was a guy who a lot of scouts had interest in because he's got the raw skills. He's got a live arm. He's got a lot of running ability, but he just never put it together into consistent, good quarterback play. He never really took care of the ball, never really got consistent accuracy and ball placement. And he didn't show much of that at the Senior Bowl after missing the whole season, which he opted out of, which was really disappointing given that he's such a raw prospect. And some people were thinking that maybe he was scared of losing that quarterback competition at Georgia after transferring from Wake Forest. But for me, I think he really needed to show a lot more. And he actually regressed over the week. He was better on Tuesday than he was on Wednesday or Thursday. And he did not look like a guy you can take anywhere near the day 2, day 3 turn. And so I think that if a team isn't taking a shot at him to seriously develop him into a future quarterback for them, he could fall so far because he's not a guy that you look at right now and you're like, that's a really good backup in the NFL. So for me, Jamie Newman's week was just really disappointing, and his draft stock were just plummeted.
Yeah, I know. Newman was a guy that I was pretty low on. I early when we started our Instagram page, I had posted a scouting report on him. And like Costa said, it was pretty much, he's got all these intangibles. He's got a really good arm, but he just never put any of the intangible parts together. He's throwing the ball all over the place. His accuracy was not very good, and like you said, Costa, he regressed over the week, which you don't expect from anyone. You expect, maybe you look a little rough on the first day. You're playing with all new guys. Okay, that's kind of expected. The guys that are great on day one are the guys that stand out, but Newman's best day was his first day, and that's just a really big red flag. And it's unfortunate, but I think, that's something that, I might have seen coming. I don't really expect him to have any potential to start at the next level. So I'll hop into my 3 disappointments, or guys that, drop their draft stock a little bit. The first one I'll touch on is Hamza Nasiruddin. I cannot say his name. Nasiruddin, the safety from Florida State. And, unfortunately, he had the torn ACL, I'm pretty sure. It was the knee injury. And so this was the first time we're seeing him, post-op. And we were really hoping to see the things that he flashed before his injury, so his athleticism and his range. And he really did not show that at the Senior Bowl. He showed that, he can play in the box, come down, make tackles. But the issue was he could not move backwards. He could not move laterally. And especially with the fact that, he just had the injury. And those were some of his not biggest positives, but those were things that, he showed that he had before he tore his ACL. And, it's just really disappointing to see somebody that, probably had potential, and probably, I think for me, at a mid to late second round grade, and just seeing that stuff, I don't think I can have him in that second round range now, because those things really were some of his positives, and they've became negatives now. And I think another guy was Spencer Brown. He's the small school tackle from Northern Iowa, and he was one of the 2 that we had brought up on the Instagram page before, that we said, a guy to look out for and see how they play against the D1 FBS talent. And, unlike Quinn Marinez, he didn't really step up to the task. I think he looked a little bit overwhelmed, and I think he still has potential, but I just think he's going to need a bigger or a longer transition period to get used to the talent jump. And the last guy that I'll bring up, not somebody that really disappointed, but somebody whose stock dropped a little bit, because coming into the Senior Bowl, I think most people thought of Dylan Linduz from North Dakota State as a tackle. But I think after the Senior Bowl, I was seeing a lot of people talk about the fact that he's probably going to have to move into guard, and just the fact moving from tackle to guard, that's going to make your draft stock drop a little bit. So it's nothing against his performance. It's just that's where he fits to the next level, and that's going to make your draft stock drop a little bit.
Yeah, and so now moving on to a question I think that a lot of people are going to want to hear the answers to, because he's just a high-profile guy. Mac Jones, the quarterback from Alabama, who recently won a national championship after a Heisman finalist season at Bama. Let's just talk about his week, and then maybe afterwards talk about our thoughts on him. I know my thoughts on him. I know your thoughts, Alex, but I'd be interested to hear what Nathan thinks about him as a prospect. So, Nathan, if you just want to start off with just how you thought Mac Jones performed at the Senior Bowl.
Well, I really thought he had an exceptional week, honestly. I mean, he came in and, you knew he was going to ace the playbook, and you knew he was a 4.0, 4.1 GPA student at Alabama. So I don't think the mental aptitude that it would take to relay those long verbiage plays, I don't think that was ever going to be an issue. So he checked that box. Matt Rule came out and said that he was an exceptional leader, that he has all the right traits, and he was early to meetings. He took all the notes. So, and it sounds minuscule and menial, but those are the things that people are really looking for at the Senior Bowl beyond the play. It's, can you be a professional and can you handle everything that comes with it? So he checked that box, and on the field, he looked in command. He didn't force the ball anywhere that it didn't need to go. He made smart decisions. He made accurate choice. He threw the ball accurately. And so, I mean, I also feel like he showed a little more mobility than we saw from him in college. In Alabama, you saw a lot of like schemed bootlegs and, half field reads and whatnot. But I feel like at the Senior Bowl this week, I was really impressed seeing him like escape structure, and if it's not there, like step up in the pocket and evade interior traffic. So I think that actually surprised a lot of people, including myself. So I was really happy with the week he had, and while I think he's like an early second round guy just based off quarterback value and what he can do at the position, I think if you see a team draft him in the 20s or the 19, I wouldn't really bat an eye. And I also know, because quarterback situations are so needy across the league, it would make sense to me. And I feel like everything he did this week contributed to him being thought of in that area. So
Yeah, so I know Mac Jones is a guy that both me and Costa are a little lower on, I would say, than you, and definitely than consensus. We have him as both, third round guys, and he's my fifth quarterback, and Costa, he was your sixth. I don't know if the Senior Bowl changed your opinion, but like you said, Nate,
Wait, that was sixth. That was sixth before Carson Strong announced he's going back to school. Just to clarify. Right. Yeah. So yeah, that bumps him up with Carson Strong returning to Nevada. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was saying was I was really impressed with his Senior Bowl. I think he showed the things that I would have expected. He made smart decisions, and that's what we saw at Alabama. He didn't make poor decisions, throw interceptions. But I think he really showed that he could command a team and lead a team. And I think he showed that he was really well. He was good with being on page with receivers that he played with for 2-3 days. So that really impressed me. And I think, that's going to make me bump up my grade of him a little bit. And he's definitely going to be solidly ahead of Kyle Trask now, who had the injury, so he couldn't play in the Senior Bowl. So that was unfortunate for him. But that doesn't change my overall opinion that, I think Jones is probably just a spot starter. I don't see him being somebody that's going to be a 10-year solid starter in the league. And Costa, I know you think similar opinions as me. So what do you think of his Senior Bowl?
Well, first, I just want to talk about this strictly the Senior Bowl. He was by far the best quarterback in attendance. I do think this was a very underwhelming Senior Bowl quarterback class. Just watching so many of the one-on-ones, I was just, a lot of the times the wide receiver would run a great route, get open. I see the ball 10 yards away from him, and I know some of the guys there, like Sam Ellinger and Jamie Newman and Felipe Franks. They're really just late round guys, and they didn't do much to prove otherwise. So that also helped Mac Jones shine next to all those guys who are really just not future NFL starters by any means. But at the same time, he had a great week, and he definitely showed that he can have that chemistry with guys who are going up against NFL talent equal to them, instead of his All-Star class that he had at Alabama with all those first round talents. And I think, but at the end of the day, I'm going to probably bump him up a little bit, maybe from the mid to late third to like the early to mid third in my actual grade. But at the end of the day, I still think that he's not a franchise quarterback in the next level. I think that he's got mediocre physical traits. Even if he showed more mobility than we thought he had, he doesn't have the strongest arm. He's not the most athletic. And for a guy of his physical traits, I think he'd have to compensate for that with his mental game more than he does. I think that a lot his ball placement for me, like when I watched on tape, I thought it was way more spotty than people really ever talk about. I thought that his supporting cast really bailed him out sometimes, and a lot of people like to say that, but I do think it's true that the talent around him elevated him and not vice versa. I thought that he really threw the ball against pressure that he wasn't really aware of a little too often, and I really think that he doesn't have any trait that makes me think that he's going to be a franchise quarterback that you can really, even if you coach him up to be able to feel the rush better, to be able to throw a more accurate ball. He's still not a dynamic passer to me. My comparison for him is one I actually like a lot. I think my comparison for Mac Jones is Case Keenum. I think that's really how we could see Mac Jones playing out the next level. I think that Keenum is a guy who, we've seen it, if you put him in a perfect situation, or not even a little less than perfect, but if you put him in a situation where he's got good talent around him and you're making him just throw the ball to where the guys are open, he can lead a team and down a really good stretch like he did in the playoffs with the Vikings. I just don't think Mac Jones is a starter every single year as a franchise quarterback for a team, and so that's just my analysis of him. But I definitely do think this Senior Bowl helped his chances of being a first rounder with teams like the Washington Football Team, the Chicago Bears, the Indianapolis Colts, the Pittsburgh Steelers. There are just so many teams in that back half of the first round that need a quarterback or a long-term option and that don't have one right now. That I think one of those teams is going to take Mac Jones in round one.
And yeah, I think like honestly, Mac Jones, I've probably been really like doing these players for like 3 years now, like seriously, like me writing notes in like my little Google Docs like 4 years ago that don't even make sense, doesn't really count. But he's honestly one of the hardest quarterback evaluations that I've ever done, because like I said earlier, you're going and you're seeing these guys and you're looking like, okay, prototypical size. He doesn't check that box. He's like 6'2", 210, and prototypical mobility and prototypical arm talent, and he doesn't really fit any of those. So like it's really one of those things. And he also has 3 first-round wide receivers if you count John Mechie, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a year from now. So I think where he projects though is like, you're right, his arm talent's nothing special, but mentally speaking, I mean, you look at guys like the Washington Football Team, and where was their big divorce with Haskins is that he didn't really know how to run their system, handle their system, and he also couldn't handle the mature aspects of being a professional. So guys like that who have a roster that's ready in other areas and who can't afford to wait on a guy like Alex Smith, because we don't know where Alex Smith is health-wise, or Kyle Allen or Taylor Heineke, which I don't think any of us thought was ever going to be the answer, but he's a guy who can come in for a couple of years, run that system, get the ball where it needs to be as like a game manager type, and win them some football games. And I think, like, I agree, Costa. I don't think he's going to come in and transcend the league with his talents. I don't think he's going to be anything more than a real game manager who can put the ball in different places. But I think a team like the Washington Football Team, like you said, I think he can come in and elevate the rest of the roster to the best of his ability year one and be a spot starter for a few years and emerge into being a backup when a better option comes available. So I agree.
Yeah, so we just had a quick question come up. I'll throw it on the screen. It says, what do we think of the 2022 class? And I know I haven't done much watching at all. And I think we can just, throw off maybe a couple quarterback names. So obviously, we have the top 4 quarterbacks going most likely the top 10. And then so, maybe some quarterbacks, if there's a team that says, we don't like Mac Jones, maybe we'll wait for the 2022 class and maybe just rattle off maybe 2 or 3 names that really come to mind that, we'll be looking at for 2022 to say this guy might be the top quarterback. Costa, if you have anybody off the top of your head that you just want to throw out?
Yeah, I think for me, what I think of in the 2022 QB classes, for me, there's a lot of uncertainty. Right? Really, like last year, we knew a lot of people were thinking Lawrence, Fields, and Zach Wilson emerged. And Lawrence, Fields, Lance, and then Zach Wilson emerged and joined them. Right now, there's really no pecking order, which really makes the quarterback class so interesting. I think you've got Sam Howell is probably the one that people are considering above others. Then you got Kadon Slovis from USC. You've got Spencer Rattler. Wait, is he going to be eligible next year?
Yeah,
he'll be eligible. Yeah, he will be. Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma. You've got I think Carson Strong is a guy that I want to highlight because I'm a big Carson Strong fan. I was watching him over a winter break in December because I thought he might declare this year. And I think that he's a guy who's improved so much in his 2 years. He's got an elite arm. He can really drop it like in the bucket from 50 yards out. And he's I think his only real knock on in terms of something you can't coach is that he's just not very mobile, but he can really sling it from inside the pocket. And I think that as he learns, as he just gets more of a feel for the game, I think he will next year. He's going to keep improving. He's going to be a first round prospect for me. And so just like with all those names you've got, I'll just to recap, you've got Howell, Slovis, Rattler, Desmond Ridder, who I'm not a big fan of, but we'll see how he improves next year. Carson Strong. There's just so many names that'll could potentially pop up as top guys next year.
Yeah, I agree with you. You said I think it's really fluid. There's no, I mean, I think right now Howell's, he's probably number one on the majority of boards, but you never know what's going to happen in a year. Obviously, like you said, Zach Wilson, 2019, he didn't really have a great season. And then 2020, he just hopped onto the screen and really impressed everyone. And similarly in 2019 with Joe Burrow. So there's always that, I don't want to say threat, but possibility that somebody that people were thinking, this guy's a 5th round, 6th round pick at best, jump onto the screen and they just impress everybody and they're the top 5 talent. But for me, I think, Howell's number one on a lot of people's boards. I wouldn't be surprised if, by the end of the 2022 college season, I wouldn't be surprised if Spencer Rattler was number one. I think people will really be intrigued by his mobility. And I think the second half of the season at Oklahoma, he really started to show that he matured a little bit and was starting to get a better hold of the offense and offense. Obviously, he has Lincoln Riley as his head coach, so that's only going to help him.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm with you guys. I mean, besides the quarterbacks, I haven't done a ton of work. I'm neck deep in these 2021 guys right now, but I think 2 non-QB guys that just come to the top of my head. And again, there's probably guys I'm missing, but Kayvon Thibodeau, defensive end from Oregon, he might not be declared next year because next year he's a true junior. But I think with the type of first 2 seasons he's had in the college, career he's put together so far, and I think what he's going to do next year, I think he'll be, possibly a top 10 pick because, what's the NFL looking for every year? It's guys who can get to the passers, the Mahomes, the Jacksons, and, all the new guys emerging. And I think Kayvon Thibodeau is a guy who we're going to be talking a lot about in the next year for sure. And another guy, honestly, I thought we'd be talking about right now as a Senior Bowl guy or maybe first round at wide receiver is Chris Olave. I remember watching him at the end of the year and thinking that he was going to be a surefire slot receiver at the next level and that he might be in the first round discussion because, again, he played really well for the limited time that he got to play. But, he decided to return to school, so I think he'll definitely be in the wide receiver 1 conversation come next April.
Yeah, I know it was a big surprise that he was going back to school. I think that for me, I don't know if he's going to improve his stock that much. I thought he's probably going to be a late first round guy, but I you seem to think that he can vault himself into that wide receiver 1 conversation. So I guess we'll see if it pays off for him, the decision to return.
Yeah, and just a few other guys, just to throw out. Evan Neal, the tackle from Alabama. I know in the national championship game, people were talking about him being, a potential top 3 pick. And I remember in watching some Alabama games, he was just really, really impressive. And then obviously Stingley, the cornerback from LSU, I think he's really showed that, he could be a top 10 pick. And Justin Ross, the receiver from Clemson, who really, really showed up as a true freshman with Trevor Lawrence. And then he had that unfortunate neck injury, and then he couldn't play this year. And people weren't sure if he was ever going to be able to play football again. And he's coming back. He's going back to Clemson, and he's able to play. So I'll definitely love to see what he can do.
Yeah, I really hope that he's back to his former self, because he was an impressive wide receiver. So, and just getting back into the 2021 draft class, and to really wrap up this Senior Bowl coverage, let's just go around, and who's one Senior Bowl guy that we haven't talked about yet, who's really an under the radar guy that you like in this draft class, Nathan?
For me, it's Dante Smith, offensive tackle from Eastern Carolina. He didn't play in the game on Saturday because I think he had a sprained thumb or a sprained wrist or something like that. But I think throughout the week, we really got to see that he is someone that teams are going to be looking at. He has 35-inch arms. He's 6'5". And on last year's roster, he was only listed at 275 pounds, which is, an obvious red flag for NFL teams evaluating future offensive linemen. But he bulked up to 300 pounds, and he's 6'5" with 35-inch arms and an 85-inch wingspan. So he has all the traits and tools that people desire. And you come out and you look at one-on-ones and you watch how easy he moves. He's an easy glider. He's super athletic out of his stance, and he actually has really advanced hands for someone who I find still to be raw in certain intricacies of the position. So I think Dante Smith, while still raw and while still has work to do, I feel like he can put himself in the Ezra Cleveland, Brian O'Neill type offensive tackle mold where he could be athletic and hold up against the speed rushers in the NFL.
Yeah, so my guy is someone that kind of had a down week. I know we highlighted him on our Instagram page, but Ramondre Stevenson, the running back from Oklahoma, and he's just a guy that he's just the kind of running back that I like. I like guys that are bulldozers, guys that will run people over. Maybe they don't have game-breaking speed, but if you give them the ball, they're going to break 2-3 tackles and just play hard, play angry, and just look to run people over. And I think, with how the NFL offenses are expanding and you have so many different roles for so many different guys, I think that he might be able to just find a role on a roster where, he's not going to be a starter, but, a guy where, all right, we need these tough yards. They're going to give him the ball and he's just going to run through everybody. Kind of like, like what a fullback was in the 80s. I think it could – be a modern day fullback almost, where he's a running back, but he's a guy that we're going to give the ball to, and we need to get 2-3 yards on third down or even fourth down now with all the teams going for it on 4th and 1, 4th and 2. I think he could be a guy that could really carve out a role for himself as just a power back. And, sometimes these guys just have 1 or 2 big games and then just start to put together games and have a really good season. So he's a guy that I like to keep my eye out on for him. That's more because I like the style of play that he has. But Casa, what would you say about your under the radar guy?
Yeah, so for me, I know the small school scene is really big in producing some top level NFL wide receivers. I know over the years we've had Antonio Brown come out of Central Michigan. We've had Kenny Golladay come out of Northern Illinois. We've had Cooper Kupp come out of Eastern Illinois. And I know the latter two, Golladay really impressed, not at the Senior Bowl because he didn't get an invite, but at the East-West Shrine Game, which unfortunately couldn't happen this year. And Cooper Kupp really impressed at the Senior Bowl. So I think that the guy who could be next in line is Austin Watkins, the receiver from UAB, the University of Alabama, Birmingham. For me, he's really checks all the boxes. He's big at 6'3". He's got good speed to threaten downfield. He's got good route running, and that's something that was kind of more in flashes on tape, but that he turned into something that he showcased at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was just, and for me, the fluidity he has at that size on top of the speed is so impressive, because watching his Senior Bowl tape, he was just setting guys up with his routes in just the most fluid manner and getting past them downfield with speed. He's a guy who I think where he needs to improve is just the nuances of getting open on the first and second level, but he could really develop into a star receiver. There's so much upside in Austin Watkins, and so I have him in the second round range with my grade. And I love Austin Watkins. He's my under the radar guy.
Yeah, and that about wraps up our Senior Bowl review. Thanks to everyone that tuned in and listened. Thanks everybody that's watching later on our podcast or on YouTube. Thanks to Nathan for coming down and joining us today. And be sure to check him out. 7th Round on Instagram. It's a fairly big Instagram account, so I'm pretty sure you've heard about it. But with all that said, that's it from us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And be sure to check back next week.